Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 2 of the Monday Q&As. So let's knock this out. First question. What are your thoughts on keeping insulin higher throughout the day with a view to building muscle? Well, most pro bodybuilders do that. They inject insulin every 2 to 3 hours throughout the day. However, assuming you're not going to be using a lot of drugs, no, this isn't desirable. This whole idea that insulin is anabolic is true to a certain extent, but the thing that you have to remember is that you're only getting the insulin because you're driving it into the muscle tissue. And if your muscle tissue has a higher insulin sensitivity, you're going to produce less insulin. So I think what you mean is should you be eating carbs throughout the day? Should you be eating protein throughout the day if your goal is to build muscle mass? The answer is probably yes. But you shouldn't be focused on trying to produce more insulin, because the more insulin that you produce, the more insulin resistant you become. So you shouldn't be sitting here going, man, I'm going to go slam a bunch of table sugar every 2 hours in order to keep my insulin levels high. That's not ideal. Over the period of time, you're going to make keeping your body composition where you want it more difficult. That's one of the reasons I gained so much weight when I was sick. I had insulin insensitivity as a result of my elevated cortisol levels from my autoimmune disease. So it made me hungrier all the time, my blood sugar lower, so the more I ate, the hungrier I got, and the lazier I got, and the more I laid around. I was already in bed sick, and so I gained a lot of fat. The thing you're going to find is that if you start getting insulin resistant from doing what you're talking about, you're going to be hungrier, you're going to eat more, and you're going to have more food intake in order to get the nutrition that you want for your muscles, because you need the insulin to shuttle nutrients into your muscle tissue. So if they start becoming insulin resistant, it's going to hurt your gains without consuming more food to get there, and in case more food will equal more fat. It's just a vicious cycle. So no, you shouldn't be focused on elevating your insulin levels. You should just be focused on good nutrition and getting sufficient nutrition throughout the day. And your insulin levels will actually be lower on a good balanced diet where you're not overeating a lot and you're training hard. Your actual insulin levels will be lower throughout the day as a result of that, not higher. All right, next question. What are your thoughts on using peptides to recover from a strained or pulled muscle? Which one do you believe is the best to use? For muscle pulls or strained muscles or minor tears, peptides are amazing. Now, a lot of people are talking about TB500. I don't have any firsthand knowledge. I have no experience with it. I don't know coaches who are using it, so I can't answer that one. In my personal experience of dealing with coaches and athletes, MGF or mechano growth factor is downright amazing for muscle pulls. I have used this personally myself, and I can attest to the fact that it is downright amazing. And another upside to mechano growth factor is that even though it's banned in sports, WADA has admitted there is no way to have a drug test for it. They don't have any way to develop a drug test currently, and it's probably going to be 5 to 10 years before there's any way to even test for it. So for those of you athletes out there who are drug tested who are getting injured, mechano growth factor is a fantastic way to speed up and heal those muscle pulls, those soft tissue tears and pulls. All right, next question. P.E.D and British Army, what do you know about this? Do they test for steroids, etc., and are they widely used? All right, guys, most of you may know steroids aren't illegal to use in the United Kingdom. So that should tell you something right there. Drug use and steroid use among people who train for anything is astronomically high in the UK in my personal experience. Now, as far as military forces using PEDs, that's pretty standard. Anabolic steroids are massively used in most spec ops communities in every first world country. So England is not exempt. And if anything, England would be less exempt from that statement, considering how massively easy they are to acquire and how widespread anabolic steroid use is inside the United Kingdom. So it's a pretty sure bet that tons of British infantry guys are on them. And there's a reason for that. When you have a job to where your speed, your strength, your stamina, your recovery ability could literally be your life or death, could determine whether you live or die, anabolic steroids and other PEDs start looking real attractive. All right, next question. Eating most of our fiber in the form of frozen vegetables added to shakes as ice and consuming while very cold to prevent tasting vegetables. Does this negatively impact nutrient absorption? Many claim that eating hot cooked food improves nutrient absorption, augments amount of the nutrients. What you think? All right, no. The latter is only true because cooking food, it's not the fact that it's hot, it's the fact that cooking food makes it easier to digest and absorb. And yeah, it's true. A lot of plants, we absorb more vitamins and minerals and phytonutrients from them when they're cooked than when they're raw. That is actually true. However, the cooking can degrade some of the nutrients, but even when the cooking degrades some of the nutrients, the amount we absorb is oftentimes still higher. So yeah, cooking is a good way to absorb more nutrients, but it doesn't mean the raw vegetables don't work. In fact, freezing vegetables usually preserves most of the nutrients in them better than just leaving them raw on the shelf for several days. So freezing and consuming frozen vegetables is actually quite a good way to do that. And keep in mind, a lot of those frozen vegetables are pre-cooked before they go in there, so you're getting the double bonus. You're getting the pre-cooked vegetables, so you're getting easier to absorb the nutrients because they're cooked, and then because they're frozen, it preserves the nutrients better. So it's not a bad approach at all. It's perfectly fine. Don't worry about it. Just get your vegetables in. All right, next question. Jason, what is the purpose of the stretch you do prior to deadlifting? Is it to stretch out the abs, get a larger volume of air in, or is it not even a stretch and you're tightening the posterior chain? Yeah, that little thing that hip drop that you guys see me do, that little stretch where I lock my knees and then drop, that is kind of called a pre-motor unit slack technique. What that does is that it primes my nervous system for the pull, gets me into the motion of pulling backwards and dropping down to pull back so that I'm already in motion and I'm not having to pull completely from a dead stop. And the other thing it does is that it lets me get tighter and pull all of the slack out of my body. Because you guys notice I'm a little loose. My back is rounded a little bit at the top. And then I drop down and everything locks in super tight, ratchets in tight the split second before I pull. So it actually helps reduce slack and improve tightness on top of all of that. So that's why I do that. All right, next question. I've heard that slow and steady pace walking is advantageous for fat loss, but what about a slow steady walk with a heavy backpack or vest? Will it help me lose fat as well? Is it natty? Don't worry about being natty or not. It's a completely irrelevant topic. The whole idea of natty versus enhanced is stupid because, yeah, honestly, lifting weights or using tools is enhanced. That's not natural. But honestly, who gives a fuck, right? So, yes, slow walking can be advantageous because it burns calories. You're up and moving around and burning calories. So a nice brisk walk can be good for fat loss, but throwing a backpack on or adding extra weight is just going to make you burn more calories. If you're burning more calories, it's going to be easier to lose fat. So yes, it's advantageous. And I think most people would be able to understand the common sense behind that. You're simply burning through more calories, you're doing more work. All right, next question. What's your thoughts on Bulgarian light training during a caloric deficit? Referring to Greg and Omar's version, not the Bulgarian weightlifting team. Actually, I've never seen Omar's version, but I'm familiar with Greg's. Yeah, it's acceptable during a calorie deficit. You can train using the same style in a deficit that you use in a surplus. You just need to be more aware of overreaching too far. You need to be more aware of higher rates of injury. Pay more attention to connective tissue and things. If you are going to, say, do a Bulgarian type system in a calorie deficit, try to keep your training maxes under RPE 9, maybe RPE 8.5. Try not to push near that bleeding edge so that you're not burying yourself. Really watch to make sure that you're not hitting any grinders more so than you do on the other Bulgarian light days. Like when you're overeating, people might grind a little bit every now and then. You really need to avoid that completely when you're in a calorie deficit. Really pay attention to your joints and connective tissue. And if anything starts to hurt, it's time to deload. Don't take those sort of risks, particularly when you're under eating and losing weight, because you're simply more prone to energy. You're more prone to focusing less in the gym with less food, being a little less motivated sometimes. So again, make sure that you really focus on your technique and form and avoid injuries. All right, next question and last question of the week. Should you drop weight on isolation exercises during deload, or don't even do them, or it doesn't matter because it's isolation exercises? All right, when you're deloading, yeah, the whole idea is to let your body recover. And it's particularly most important is that it is the time period in a deload is where your connective tissue heals the most. A lot of isolation exercises, particularly due to the way that some people perform them, can cause inflammation of connective tissue. So I generally recommend that on deloads that people remove their isolation exercises completely and just focus upon their primary movements. Pick the most important movements in your routine that contribute most to whatever your goals happen to be, and those are what you need to continue to do on your deload at the reduced weight, and cut any of the fluff out because you don't really need it at that point. The big exercises are going to give you the training stimulus and the muscle protein synthesis uptime to keep the muscles growing and adapting during that recovery phase that you stimulated with all the other work. So in other words, your barbell rows with a reduced weight are still giving the muscle protein synthesis uptime, and say your biceps and your brachialis, just because you're training them again during the deload with just even a reduced weight. So what ends up happening, all of the super compensation from all the curls and weighted chin-ups and other stuff you're doing for them during your main training phase near the end is going to catch back up during that time period, and that additional training will allow them to adapt and grow. So you're still going to receive the training stimulus from your heavier training or your higher volume training and higher workload training during your deload. So you're going to grow as a result of that during the deload. You don't need to come back in and isolate everything again and put extra stress on the connective tissue. You're just coming in to maintain motor patterns and to respark a little protein synthesis so that you can grow and adapt from the previous training load. So hopefully that makes sense of why it's not really necessary to do the isolation movements and why it's probably a good idea to just remove them out for the most part during a deload week. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.